Have you ever wondered how much your neighbours spent on their holidays? Well, I can't tell you that unless you're my neighbour, I guess, which would be weird. But today I'm going to talk about exactly how much I spent on the 2 cycle tours I did in 2023. I'm hoping that it will help you get an idea of how much other people are spending, how much you might spend if you're going on your first ever cycle tour, and the kind of different options you have and how they affect your expenditure during that trip. So let's get started. I went on 2 trips in 2023 that were cycle touring trips. The first one I went in June and I took the ferry to Brittany in northern France, and I spent a week, I think it was 7 nights in total, cycle touring around from Roscoff, the ferry port town on the north coast. I spent cycling around the coastline. There's a video somewhere. I don't know how these things work. I'll put it in somewhere so you can watch that. And then the second trip I did was in November in the UK. So it was in the county that I live in, although the county I live in is really big, as evidenced here. Can you see that? This big county, really big county. Down in the south. Oh, I feel like a weather presenter. Oh, and you're going to get showers coming down from the North Sea across the... Anyway, so I live down here in the southwest. I went cycle touring like around this kind of coastline here. And that was in November. It was really, really cold. It was a very different type of trip. And that trip was only 3 nights. It was 3 nights. So to give you an idea of how much I spent on different types of things, I'm going to break this down into food costs, accommodation costs, and then other, because I'm an accountant. Luckily, I have pre-planned this video, and so I've actually already got all the numbers. You don't have to sit here and watch me go through my bank statements. So, France 2023. Let me consult my notebook. Also, before I jump into this, all these costs are for 2 people because I went with my partner, so it was the 2 of us. So all these costs are technically, I guess, you can divide them in 2 to get how much it cost me personally. But obviously, had I have gone alone, it would have cost me more than half of this, because in so many places, accommodation costs don't actually halve if you're 1 person rather than 2. You know, food costs don't halve if you're 1 person rather than 2 because the way you buy food. So I've done this for actually what happened, which is 2 people. So the way France broke down was we drove not very far to the ferry port in Plymouth. Well, we drove to Plymouth and then we parked the car in Plymouth using a Just Park parking space. So Just Park, there are probably other companies that do this too. They allow people to rent out their own personal, private parking spaces. And I found that that is quite a cheap-ish, and I feel like I trust leaving the car in someone else's parking space better than I do in a public car park that may allow you to park for long term, if you know what I mean. Also, it's a lot cheaper than, I don't know if the ferry port in Plymouth even has a car park, long stay, maybe it does, but this is probably cheaper. I should know that. So we drove to the ferry port, parked the car in Plymouth, unloaded the bikes, everything like that, cycled to the ferry port, which was like a mile away. And then we took an overnight ferry from Plymouth in the UK to Roscoff, which is opposite on the French coast. It's quite a long, this is where the channel is really at its widest. So it's quite a long ferry. It doesn't get short, you know, the fastest you can do it is probably like 6 hours or something. So we did the overnight ferry, which meant that we had to have a cabin, so it pushed the price up, I guess. This ferry is really expensive because I guess it's such a long distance one. You have a cabin, and so you arrive late at night, so we didn't have to take that Thursday off from work. We finished work on Thursday, then drove down to the ferry port, boarded at like 10 p.m. or something, slept overnight, and then the ferry arrived in port so we could get off the ferry about 8 a.m. in the morning. And that meant we could just get on our bikes and start cycling without having sort of wasted a whole day of travel. Anyway, so after that we spent another 7 nights cycling and camping around the north of Brittany, essentially. Because we camped every single night, the campsite fees range from like 16 euros, 23 euros, 19 euros, that kind of thing. And that was for no electricity, but just a camping pitch. Like, we had a very small tent. And I love the campsites in northern France. I grew up cycle touring around those kinds of campsites, or the municipal campsites, which are even now like they're so good. They have everything that you could possibly want. Some of them even have pools in a municipal campsite. It's absolutely insane, but they're always really, really, really cheap. They're really affordable, and they're always in like beautiful places, like literally beachside campsites are the municipal campsites. Like, it's amazing. Anyway, so for that 7 nights of camping accommodation, we spent 133 euros, and at the end I'll total this up in pounds, but I haven't actually done that conversion yet. But let's say, I don't know, what's that, 110 pounds or something. That's 7 nights of accommodation, okay, for 110 pounds ish. The food, when I total this up, this is quite funny. The food is like, it's as much a part of a cycle tour as the cycling is. Like, for me, really, you're just cycling from bakery to bakery, from supermarket to supermarket, and that is the utter joy of it. I love French supermarkets. I have so much nostalgia from being a child cycle touring in France and going to these absolutely massive French supermarkets and loving it, and that has not worn off. The food that we spent, the money that we spent on food. So the way we bought food and ate food during France, we never once ate out. We never went to a cafe or a restaurant or anything like that. It was hot, so we're talking like 25 degrees every day. And that means that, you know, we just ate picnics every single day. We ate picnics and cold food for dinner as well. So we were buying baguette, we were buying salads, we were buying all sorts of delicious stuff, hummus, that kind of thing. And then we just live off that every day. So it's all cold food, it's all supermarket food, or patisserie food, or boulangerie food, I should say. And that is what we ate every single day. We did have a little stove with us, but that was our jet boil, and that is for coffee only, because that's very important. In a week, 8 days, we spent 145 euros 43 cents, which I guess, again, 120 pounds, I'm not sure, but again, I'll tally this up at the end in pounds. So we actually spent more. We spent 12 euros more over the week on food than we did on accommodation, which I feel says a lot. It's still hardly any money, really, when you think about it. That's a very cheap week of food, and it brings such joy. Like, eating and cycle touring, those two things go together so well. Okay, so camping, the camping also included 1 night in a hiking cabin, which is still in a campsite, but it was like this little wooden cabin that just had a space for 2 people to lie down in, and it had some electricity plugs in that one as well, actually. And that one cost 37 euros for the night, which I guess is like 32 pounds or something. So that 133 euros for the accommodation includes 1 night in a hiking cabin, because I thought it was going to piss it down with rain, and it was the first night and I just wanted to be bougie. In the other category is the ferry and the car parking space. So this car parking space in Plymouth cost for 8 days, I guess, £48 and 59 pence. And then the ferry cost £340 return with a cabin outbound. We didn't have a cabin inbound because it was during the day. So that was 1 night of accommodation, I guess you could say. And then the return ferry crossing. So that's £340, which is horrifyingly expensive. And that was with bicycles as well. Like, we didn't have a car, that would have cost so much more. But this is a really expensive ferry route because it's long. If you got a ferry from Dover to Calais, for instance, you could take a really early morning one or a late night one, and you could get across for like 60 quid or something. I don't know, less than that maybe. It's so much cheaper over there because it's 20 miles, but it's quite a long way from where I live, and it would be much harder for us, much more expensive to drive from Devon all the way over here to get a ferry to France. In total, that French holiday cost us £626 and 67 pence, over half of which was the ferry itself. So if you can find a better way of getting to France, a cheaper way of getting to France, if you're not in the southwest for a start, Portsmouth, Poole, and Dover, or I guess the Channel Tunnel maybe. Those are all going to be much cheaper ways to get to France, I would imagine, and you could save a lot of money by not taking the Plymouth Roscoff ferry, which is horrifyingly expensive. But so when it comes to food and accommodation, we spent, I mean, what is that, 280 euros, so like 260 pounds or something, 250 pounds, I don't know, on food and accommodation for over a week. Okay, that was a cheap holiday, and that was great. Now, moving on to November's cycle tour. This was in the UK. It was during November, so really the off season. I mean, the whole southwest is a tourist region, so prices can get massively high in the summer and the Easter holidays and things like that. But in November, those prices come down hugely because nobody comes here in the winter. For good reason, because it was like -2. That cycle tour was 3 nights. So we drove and parked our car for free at a friend's house. So obviously that cancelled out loads of, potential car parking fees. Yeah, drove to like the middle of the county and parked for free. And then we cycled to a B&B, which was a really, really beautiful boutique B&B. It was absolutely incredible. This was a really bougie cycle tour, okay? So we didn't camp because it was incredibly cold and dark. And obviously, unless you're cycling in the dark until the evening, which I didn't want to do, then you finish quite early when you're cycle touring in winter because it gets dark at 4 o'clock. And then I didn't want to be in a freezing cold in a tent for hours before I would even then go to sleep. So it just made no sense to me to camp. I'm sure lots of people like camping in the winter in the dark, but I don't. That doesn't sound very fun. So we decided to stay in hotel/B&B accommodation for those 3 nights. And the first night cost us £95. The second night cost us £79, and the third night cost £78.75. So the total accommodation for the November cycle tour was £252.75, which is more than all the accommodation and food for the French cycle tour. Just these 3 nights of accommodation, and these weren't like fancy hotels or anything. These were literally the cheapest B&Bs that I could find in November in the UK. They were really nice, but they were literally the cheapest that I could find. And then food, we it was really, really cold, so we couldn't really eat like a picnic like food like we were doing every single day in France. Breakfast was always included in these B&Bs, so that wasn't a problem. Then lunch, I can't even remember. Only 2 days. We ate at cafes only 2 days. Oh, because our cycles were really, really short. So we'd actually only be cycling for like 3 or 4 hours every day. So one day we obviously left quite late, so we had lunch with us. The second day we stopped at a cafe for lunch, and the third day we couldn't find a cafe because it was on Exmoor, and there's fuck all on Exmoor apart from some cows. So we arrived at the hotel town in Dulverton really early, so we had like coffee and cake. And then we went to the supermarket and got something after the hotel opened. In the evening, we would then go out for dinner, which was incredibly bougie and incredibly nice and very relaxing. And I enjoyed every second of it, even though it cost us £176.85 for 3 days of food, a couple of like out tea lunches, and then dinner for 3 nights of dinner. So that's less than £200, which actually isn't that expensive. It's just so expensive compared to the French trip where we spent less, so much less, for 8 days compared to 3 days. So in total, there is no other category for that because we literally didn't buy anything other than food and accommodation during that time. So the November cycle tour cost £429.60. That's compared to the French much longer cycle tour, over double the days, which cost £626.67. So there's a £200 difference there. The November cycle tour was £200 cheaper, but it was only 3 days compared to 8, and it was in November in the UK. It didn't include a ferry ride. And so that is the breakdown of how much we spent for 2 people over 2 cycle tours in the same year in neighbouring countries, literally Brittany and North Devon, I don't know what that even is. 200 miles? They're 200 miles apart. They're really close. And yet you can see that the price difference is massive. But it was like, we were staying in B&Bs for one holiday and campsites in the other. If you camp in the UK, your prices will go up as well, because camping in the UK can be really expensive and it's hard to find affordable campsites. Not affordable. It's hard to find campsites at the same price that they are in Brittany. It's just, you're not going to. But in Brittany, the campsites are really affordable. So I hope that was interesting. I hope that gave you some insight into the different ways that you can cycle tour and how that affects the cost. Like, I'm kind of comparing apples and oranges, summer in France compared to winter in the UK, but you can still see that winter in the UK is an expensive way of doing it because camping and stuff is harder, and summer in France can still be a really cheap holiday, even though that's June, you know. It's not like summer holiday season, but it is the high season. And obviously this whole thing includes having the bike. So I haven't included in these costs the actual equipment and clothing that I have, because I just have those things. I've accrued them over many years. So I borrowed stuff as well. So my partner happens to have 2 handlebar bags, both of which are about 45 years old. So I borrowed one of those. I borrowed my panniers from my sister because her panniers are much bigger than mine, because she's much more hardcore and needs them much more often than I do. So I borrowed her panniers. My bike is just my bike. It's my gravel bike, and I change the tyres depending on what I'm using it for. I took my gravel tyres for this trip. I have a bike rack that I put on. Then I have the tent, my sleeping bag, my roll mat, all of those things. You know, like if you've never been cycle touring before and you don't have that array of stuff, like you don't need a cycle touring appropriate sleeping bag, but obviously you need quite a lightweight sleeping bag and you need quite a lightweight tent and things like that. So if you don't have any of that stuff and you want to go on a cycle tour, maybe you'll go on more, but for now you just want to go on one. Beg and borrow those things, like as much as you can, because if I counted up how much money it would cost me to buy all the stuff you need for cycle touring from scratch, you're looking at a lot of money. And all the clothing, things like that as well. Like you obviously need bib shorts, or you need, you know, padded shorts. Cycling jerseys is great. You don't have to have a cycling jersey, but they're useful. So there are lots of things involved that make cycle touring itself from scratch expensive. But once you have all the equipment, you don't ever need to change it. People will try and sell you new cycle touring equipment. You don't need it. Like, I mean, a bike rack is a bike rack is a bike rack at the end of the day. And panniers should, like, I have, like, my sister's panniers are all elite panniers. They'll last and have already lasted for decades. They will last for decades more. You only need to buy a lot of these things once. When I was a kid and we were cycle touring, we were camping in tents that were much heavier than today's tents, and my parents had already had them for 20 years, you know? So the stuff that you need for cycle touring is kind of once buy, look after forever and use forever and repair, things like that. But yeah, like these are cheap holiday. Oh well, my French cycle tour was a cheap holiday because I already had all of that stuff. So I hope this was useful, and I hope you're going to go cycle touring, and I hope you already go cycle touring and you love it. If you do, tell me, like, what do you think of these prices? Are they crazy high? Are they crazy low? Would you never spend £340 on a ferry ticket? Oh, makes me sick just thinking about it. But I also don't want to drive for hours to Dover. I mean, like 6 or 7 hours to Dover. I'm not doing that. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.